Great to be with you, Adriana. How is life? All in all, I feel like I know you on many levels, but I'd love to get to know your story more and your journey. So would you like to run us through? I mean, it could take days talking about your story, but
Yeah.
in short, would you love to run me and the listeners through what brought you to how you are today, your approach to life, what you're teaching, what brought you to the journey?
Oh, well, yes, that's a very big question, Stuart.
Yes, it is.
But I really feel in the work that I do with people, the importance of our stories, also the unimportance of our stories,
Yeah,
ironically enough.
for sure.
But I think we find a lot of relief from the attachment that we kind of get enmeshed inside of with our stories through sharing them and through letting them kind of open up and air out. So I appreciate you asking. Um, a lot of my spiritual path and life um, began probably when I was young. I grew up in New Jersey with a very interesting, kind of typical New Jersey Italian family with like typical drugs and abuse and that kind of energy. There used to be this show called The Sopranos. I don't know if you all
Of
ever
course.
watched
Oh,
anything
yeah.
like that there. So
Uh-huh.
as a teenager, I remember watching it with my dad and being like, this is very interestingly similar to like not as much out loudness with the killing and drugs, but like how, because it doesn't really work like that when you're not on a TV show, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that kind of secretive, hidden energy, So I took a lot of LSD and psychedelics as soon as I could. I mean, any drug really, as soon as I could.
How old were you as soon as you could? Because I can relate to that as well. But how young did you dive into that?
Yeah, I'm probably like 11 or,
Yeah.
I probably started smoking weed and drinking when I was like 11. And then
Mm-hmm.
I started doing a lot of acid, when I was like 13, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And that and doing just a lot of psychedelics, which I feel like really helped keep me off of hard drugs, even though I was doing those too. But I really kind of leaned into the taking acid every day in high school, basically, and somehow made it all the way through. And that lasted up until I went to college also in New Jersey, and I was a hairstylist actually for many years. That was my first career because I could still kind of do drugs and hang out, and I was always really smart. Like I went to university and kind of kept going to school, but never really wanted to do very much. Like I didn't really understand the whole system of school, and none of it really made sense to me. And when I was in college is when I started practicing yoga in this gym that was like this dank, old, stinky gym in a basement in New Jersey. But I remember like the smell of the carpet, like just super kind of gnarly, and how good I felt. Like it was kind of the first time that I ever, I think, felt good since I was a kid. Like when I was young, I was always very expressive and free and performing. And, when I was really little, and then that ended probably around 7. And then I kind of like really was very hidden and very insecure and very afraid really of the world or of people. Like I had a lot of anxiety and all that. So that was kind of my introduction to yoga. And I loved it so much, and I just kept doing it on and off throughout college. I was engaged, and then I ended that relationship when I got out of college, and then kind of went back to my, I don't know, punk rock roots of just a lot of wildness and drugs. And then my dad, who had battled drugs on and off his whole life, mostly heroin and cocaine, and he was relatively off of drugs during the years that I was around. Like when I was a kid, he was on and off them, and he found this passion for flying small airplanes. And when he found that passion, he kind of got off of them a lot, and was really pursuing this passion. And then that lasted some years, and then that dissolved. And so he passed when I was 24, and I buried him on my 25th birthday, which is like a big part of my story, this father, wound, and that whole experience, and knowing it was from drugs, even though everyone in the family was still kind of like, what happened? And you're like, oh my God, like, how are we still not talking about it? And the pain of the untruth, the pain of like that veil of illusion that was so thick, that at that point I was just like still doing things like that, but also starting to recognize how strange it is to like live in a world, period. Like to live, especially when you're like living in a world that's like relatively full of truth. I mean, it's still super weird because we're all kind of like still kind of doing that a little bit, this is just like a thick extreme example. So that was really, obviously very hard and very painful. And also I remember feeling really relieved. In a lot of ways, because I knew he was really suffering, and I was very attached to him, and like very, I would go to New Jersey. I lived in New York at that point, in New York City, and I'd go there and visit him every week and try to kind of like cheer him up. And it was I could tell on some level that there was something wrong, even though I wasn't even really fully conscious of it, because I was also still doing a lot of drugs. So that experience of him passing really, and the grief of that, and the experience of that really took me into, I did cocaine. I remember one time I went to a party, like, I don't know, a month or two after that. And I was like, whoa, like if that wasn't a wake up call, like, and there was a part of me that always knew that I didn't fit that, that I wasn't meant to be that. And so that was the last time I did any drugs like that. And then started smoking lots and lots of weed because I think it was, and there's nothing wrong. Obviously, some people can smoke weed and they're still really great at life. I am not one of those people. So just for that disclaimer, but it did help me a lot to deal with the grief, or to not, it helped me to just get by, and then I started going crazy after yoga. Like, there's this place in New York City called the Laughing Lotus.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Dana. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just would go be at the Laughing Lotus. They had these ginger cookie, these like cinnamon tea and these ginger cookies. Like, and I can remember like the sugar of that experience after the yoga classes. I like attribute that and like Dana Flynn to like my sobriety in a weird way. Cause I just remember how good it was. And I was like, I don't need that. Like, I have something that's like satisfying and like taking me out of the pain of this life, in a way. And so I literally would go like 3 times a day sometimes, like a total yoga asana maniac. And kind of getting hushed in the yoga studios. Like, I also never really fit in the yoga studio, which was another kind of thing for me in my story of like, I didn't really fit in many places. I was like kind of a lesbian, but I really wasn't a lesbian. I was kind of like into drugs, but I was also kind of like, well, I'm not going to totally go there. I was, always felt like I didn't belong. And same thing in yoga. Like, I really connected with the practice, but was also sometimes like too loud, or forgot to take my shoes off, or like spilled something on the carpet, or, whatever. So, the messy, I recently saw this Instagram called Messy Bhakti or something like that. Or I don't know what it was, but I was like, oh God, that's totally me. But it's not my Instagram account, but I'm just saying, I was like, oh yeah, definitely relate to that. And yeah, and then I started doing some Anusara yoga teacher trainings. I, went to India every year for like 5 years in a row. I just kind of got really hooked on the power of love, which is the name of my school, not to be cheesy, but it really felt like that. Like, I was like, oh, I feel so loved. And I went to this place in India and I just was like, oh, like, this is like what Shakti is. Like, this is what love is. And, I had read Baba Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now, as many of us have as a kid, on acid, and being like, oh my gosh, like, thank you. And, feeling that. And then during that period of time from my dad's death when I was 25, over about 7 or 8 years, I just like went hardcore, like went to see Ram Dass, and I just did whatever it took. Like I didn't stop, and people, even to this day, somebody said to me the other day, like, dude, what about being addicted to healing? And I was like, well, you know what? Like, I don't think it's that bad. Like I'm kind of having a good time. And so like, I understand, the thing of always feeling like we need to do something extra in order to be whole. And that's not really where I'm coming from anymore. I think I for sure was definitely seeking for that, but I think that's part of the journey, and I think that's okay too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the short kind of vague version, but
thank you for sharing. Really.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I can relate on many levels as well, especially with the early drug use, I mean, it's so bizarre having young children now, and like, fuck, they're going to be that age where I was using drugs like very soon. And it's just like from a more just knowing what it does to a developing brain. I'm like, fuck, like they're going to be there so soon. But for me, it was also such a potent gateway as well, during those teenage years, especially, of really growing and developing and finding your heart, finding that love. For me, also, drugs, especially LSD, was the entry point into that. And I have gratitude for those times. At the same time, it was that nearly killed me. So it was like this fine line of like, it's a fine line. It did nearly kill me, yet it also very much woke me up, So it's
totally
just got our own trip. But let's talk about your Art of Loving and your Power of Love School. What's the Power of Love School focusing on? Of course, the power of love, but go into a bit of detail. What's it feeling like to you?
Yeah, I mean, these days, I've been doing it more officially, like in this way, like in this kind of concise power of love way, because I had led teacher trainings with other people. And, I was always, again, like not fitting into any boxes. Like I was Anusara trained. I studied Iyengar a long time. I did Kundalini yoga training, like so many trainings and so many things and so much meditation training. And I just was like, I just want to teach what is true for me. And I don't know how to I just don't even know how to put it into a box. And, the Power of Love name, I'll start with that. It came when I was, I had a very sweet and deep mystical experience when I was in India it was in a place called, thank you. And yeah, so, sorry, I got distracted because I was just getting some water.
Okay.
So I had this really deep mystical experience, and when we were on this mountain, in the Hanuman mountain, in a town called Trimbakeshwar, and it's supposedly the mountain that the god Hanuman was born on. And so there's a very sweet, small goddess temple before you get to the top of the mountain where there's the Hanuman temple. There's a very small, square, pink, like a temple made for me and any being that's trying to embrace the feminine, amazing. And so anyway, I had this it's Hanuman's mom, Janaki Mata, is in the temple. It's a very potent little spot, and I was meditating there, and I had this really deep transmission and connection to the energy there and just took this really deep vow in my heart to just share the energy of the divine feminine. And I didn't even know what the fuck that meant. I still don't even know what the fuck that means, but I have a little bit of an idea of what it means to me. And that's what I share. But in the moment, I was just like I just felt this arrow go through my heart, and then I lost my mind. And it wasn't actually that fun, but for a little while, for about 9 months, it was a little bit hard to adjust to being a person in Brooklyn. But the thing that happened when I was walking down the mountain was I just was feeling so open and free and liberated and so tender. I felt how tender my heart was, and also how much power was in that. It's this thing that we say, sensitivity is your strength and the tenderness is the power. And to say that, but then to feel your tender heart, it doesn't really make sense. When you really feel the tenderness of your heart in a certain way, it's painful. And it doesn't feel like power all the time. It feels awful sometimes. It feels like sometimes you feel like you're going to die, or, it can be so intense to be that alive, and for many of us that just live or do our best to live very awakening. And some people that are just sensitive by nature doesn't feel like empowered to be like sensitive, so nor is it what we've been conditioned, obviously. So I had this experience where I really felt that. And it's, one of those things I can't really put in words, but Rumi, as we know, is great at putting things like that into words. And I had this hit of like that Rumi poem that was like, the power of love came into me, and I became as fierce as a lion and tender as the evening star. I was dead, then alive. I was weeping, then laughing. That whole poem that you all can look up. It's a great poem. But just that piece of it. And like my ego, like my mind was like, really, you're like having a Rumi poem, like, transmission as you're like walking down these golden hills in India. But, another part of me was just like, yes, I was just in that and felt that. And that was kind of where it came from. And so I was teaching a lot in Los Angeles, and I started leading kirtan on the east side of Los Angeles where there really wasn't any. And kirtan also is something, the call and response chanting practice in Bhakti Yoga is something that really saved my life over those years that I was talking about, like going to kirtans and feeling very limited in my own expression, in my own voice, feeling my feelings. All of it was just like a nightmare, basically, for me in the beginning. And still to this day, moments where it's not that easy, but that practice really helped. And so I began leading these kirtans, and people on the east side of LA were like, what is this? And I started just chanting for a half an hour in the beginning of all my yoga classes, like sometimes 45 minutes, like yoga works like firing me. You know what I mean? They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, but like, this is all I could do, because I was also really depressed in that moment. And this was like post that experience, and in India coming back, and then I moved across the country very spontaneously and just went through a really deep time of kind of like not being fully with it. Like I really wasn't that well in my mind. I wasn't mentally well. I was still sober, but I was having a super hard time, super hard go at it. And so the only things I really felt okay with was when I was chanting and when I was dancing, because I also had practiced and studied meditation for so many years, and a lot of the meditation was, it was seated meditation, traditional. And so those were kind of the only two things that like really made me feel like, oh, I'm in my body, like just moving it around and like, just like not yoga, but like just moving it in these weird ways and feeling like, oh God, like if I don't move my body, I'm going to lose my mind. And like the vibration of the harmonium that, and my voice was like, okay, it was like, it's okay to be here. Like, it's okay to be here. And I didn't even trust all the spiritual stuff I learned, all these, I was so devoted to these certain saints. And at that point, I don't even know what I was thinking about Ram Dass or Neem Karoli Baba. They were like out of the window. I just was like, I just lost so much faith in this one moment. And so when I started leading the kirtans, I was like, I don't really care. Like, I just got to do this. And somehow it's just so many people started coming, because I think one, nobody was really doing it. We have the lovely and amazing Govindas and Radha that are leading it on the west side all the time, but nobody was really doing it like 4 years ago on the east side of LA.
Except
and
for
so
Krishnadas, huh?
Yeah, well, back in the day, yeah, totally. I mean, everywhere, obviously, he's doing it, but regularly,
Yes.
On the east side of LA, there really wasn't kirtan. And so people that were looking for it, but then also a bunch of people didn't know about this practice. And they were like, whoa, this is amazing. What's going on? And so started leading it there once a month, and it just blew up. At one point we had like 70 people at the yoga studio. And, and I was like, I'm just doing this as a practice. I'm not, I needed it, in my life. And I think a lot of other people felt that. And the power of love kind of really was birthed through that experience. And then feeling like, okay, there's all these people that are wanting to learn more about Bhakti Yoga. And I mean, I was very humbled at that time and was kind of like, I don't really know, but I definitely studied it and learned about it a lot. So let me just share it. And that's when I started the Power of Love teacher trainings with my friend who helped me. She just was like, well, what do you want to teach in a teacher training? And I was like, well, I want to teach about this and this and this, like all these things that I really love. And I want to incorporate this. And the asana that, is really healing and therapeutic, but also very open to like everybody, that this isn't a practice only certain people could do. It's like the whole Mark Whitwell. I know you just did another interview with him, and that whole thing where he always says like, if you can breathe, you could do yoga. Like I always do that because it's true, and the chanting is kind of like that, and for me, because even if you can't speak, you can do the mantra in silence. I mean, it's God is there. So
Totally.
I started leading the Power of Love trainings through that experience. And now the last thing I'll say is it feels like people find a deeper layer of their authentic expression and offering in the world. So sometimes for some people that's yoga teaching, and a lot of times that's the next album they're writing. And other times it's like a deep moment to process some grief that they never were really held inside enough to process. And then a new relationship comes after that. Or, there's so many experiences now that I've seen people go through where people really show up and do the work. And it's not the kind of thing that's just fun the whole time. It sucks right in the middle. And I always tell people that, like right in the middle, you're like in the shit. And then, you come out. But it's a deep kind of initiation into what love means to each person that does it. Because I think it's something that's so unique to all of us. So.
Sounds amazing. I want to dive into it. Sounds great. I mean, it's really refreshing to hear. And Joe and I are often chewing on what to offer in terms of a training, because there's a kind of box of what, the Yoga Alliance wants and what the kind of mainstream wants, but to be authentic with what truly lights you up and what truly brings you back to love. I mean, that's a whole nother ball game. And I'd like to really reflect and kind of emphasize that period you had when you were at Yoga Works and you were feeling the power of love awakening in you, and you didn't want to teach the way you were teaching. You started teaching what was flowing through you. And I really want to just put some time into that because it's very common for a lot of these younger teachers, and it comes up regularly in conversations of teachers like learning how to teach a certain way and teaching a lot of classes, and but then eventually this next movement of a deeper authenticity in their true inner teacher and their true gifts of teaching starts to bubble up and come forth, but it can be a challenging period. You might get fired from the studio that hired you for teaching in a particular way. Your regular students might drop away because they miss the old you. I remember having that when I started teaching differently to what I was teaching. It started just being more devotional and just deeper and whatever it was. And I remember countless times people literally saying like, I miss the old you. And but because I felt so, actually there were a couple moments where it hurts, like, oh shit, like it feels so good when I'm doing it, but holy shit, you're not liking it. And it can hurt, And I think a lot of listeners, especially, I keep hearing it come up, that predicament of like, fuck, do I start teaching what's authentic, truly like chewing on that? And it's really kind of similar to the initiation you're speaking of in the middle of the training. There's that kind of grit of like the layers peeling away and kind of old constructs melting away and being brought into conversation and insight, and then the new you bubbling up. And that kind of middle transitionary ground can be really scary and even dark night of the soul and all of that.
Because it's like the thing that you care the most about. It's like almost like when you first start teaching, in the beginning, like even if someone listening now is like in a training and they're just thinking like, well, how am I gonna, and it's like that, it is like, it's like a death and a rebirth. And I think it is hard too, once you've been doing something for us, especially if you've had any level of success with it. And this goes for anything creative. I mean, teaching yoga, being a musician, being an artist, it's like, especially if you've had any success. I mean, at that point I was like screwed anyway in a lot of ways. So it was kind of like, but I was teaching for a while, but it was like, I think especially if you have any kind of success, but I also think God really will just make it clear. Like, you know, I like didn't, it was almost like
Had no choice.
it's a little bit hard. Sometimes people ask me this, I'm like, I don't even know. Cause it was almost like, if it was up to me, I probably would have chose like not to do it. But it was just like, I was put in this position where I was like, I have nothing to give but this. Like everything that I thought I believed, all this spiritual stuff, I don't even believe it anymore. And it's not like I sat down and said that, but I just was like, the only thing that I can do that I feel like makes any sense is this. And like everything else, like I have to just let it go for now. And a lot of those things came back. I mean, you know, then during that time, I had this like whole experience where I'll share the story with you if you want to hear it, of, you know, Neem Karoli Baba coming to visit me, and like, you know, these moments of like faith rebuilding, you know, but when the faith was gone, and I think that it almost needed to happen that way to find that authentic expression. And just, it's even like, because authentic expression, I don't even know what that means. It's like a fearlessness or something that like a part of me knows, like if I just show up when I'm teaching anyway, like that flow is going to be there. And that's the thing. That's really all I have to give. I don't really have, like, Adriana is just like a flawed, like maniac, like just trying to figure stuff out like most of the time. But like when I'm in this facilitation space or I'm working with someone else, I really care about people so much, you know? And so it can be so hard when you're going through that transition of like, you know, having people say like, oh, I miss your old class, or I miss the old you, or, you know, that's so typical for all of us that go through the spiritual awakening journey as teachers, and your teaching becomes your sadhana. And then that's going to get affected too, just like your relationships. And I think that I think that's when it really, I have a good thing to say, I think. So there's two things that happen. It's like, we have to grieve, you know, that old thing that is dying. And then it also, I think for me, it's humbling, which I think is really good for us to be.
Totally.
You know, there's something humbling for someone to be like, you know what, I don't like this new thing. And for you to be like, God, and go home and be like, is this the right thing? Like, Susie loved my class, and like, now she doesn't fucking want to come. And like, I love Susie. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to disappoint her. And like, you know, you're forced to confront like your fear of disappointing people, which like, fuck, if you're going to be a humbled servant of God, like you're definitely going to confront your discomfort around disappointing people. I mean, we all have to feel that, and it's a bummer, like big time. But anybody in relationship of any kind knows that's just the nature of the reality that we have to live in. And I think also when we're willing, you know, to just do it, and when we're willing to kind of feel that one thing that we kind of know, okay, I'm going to keep following this thing, and I'm going to keep prioritizing also my own well-being and what is true for me, I have to just trust. And that's where the humility and the trust, you know, although it comes and goes, I think solidifies in terms of the ground under our feet, or the ground under our offerings that people really feel when they come to receive.
Yeah, awesome point. I'm glad you brought that in. And I guess the deeper we can identify with the love, all of the changes, all of the surface changes really don't matter so much. It's really when we're so heavily identified with this meat suit and the changing of the persona and all the various changes that come along with the karmic overlays that is challenging, and it's okay for it to be challenging. And that being humbled, fuck, it's hard being humbled, but it's so good for us, you know. It's so good for that spiritual ego that loves to build up a kind of layer of arrogance and divide that we see so much of. So yeah,
and it's so fear-based, you know. It's like all of that. I mean, we all have it, of course, too, but like it's so based in fear, and you know, the world really needs, especially those of us that are trying to focus on love and light and harmony and connection and, you know, doing good in the world, to really, I think, be a little fearless with that. I mean, like I said, I'm saying this in this moment. In other moments, I'm like, no, I don't want that. You know, it's like, whatever. But I think it's true, you know, and I just find the more that I just sit down and like am fully who I am, like literally, like the more that people are like, oh my God, thank you. It's like, yoga is, this experience of union, this experience of oneness, and I don't know how separate, like, our experience of being enough, like who we really are as a human. And this is where it gets like a little bit tricky, but like, I don't know, the more that I'm like fully Adriana, like the ego, like the personality, the more that I can accept who the heck that is, the more I experience that state of oneness in my life. Like as a mystical experience, like, yeah, it needs to dissolve. I need to just, and as a mystical experience, that's beautiful and something that I think we need to have. And that's why we're on the path. But to be able to function in that as a person, it's fucking hard unless you figure out how to really love who you are on some level. Otherwise, there's this really big divide, between us being able to have these mystical experiences and then us being like walking around like really bummed out about who we are. And like, I feel like in this moment of our evolution, it's really helpful for people to feel other people that are kind of okay with who they are.
Totally.
Not perfectly, but
kind of comes back to how we opened up the conversation of like honoring the story, but going beyond the story as well, seeing it as just a story. But
it's like in any moment where you're like, if you ever get into a fight, like with your partner or something, and it's like, it gets so intense and that like, it's like almost like if it gets super, like the ego gets like so strong, you can almost like, you could almost see it more because you're like, like sometimes it would make me laugh, it doesn't always work out so well, but sometimes I'll be in that moment, then I just like laugh and be like, oh man, like, how could I not laugh right now? Like, this is so like, you know what I mean? Like really going for it, and like, there's something about that to me is just so fascinating. I'm like, wow, like, how could I be like, it's almost like this reversal of like transcendence or something. It's like, how could I be so embodied that even my ego like takes me to that place where I'm like remembering I'm a soul. I don't know. It doesn't totally make sense, but that's been my
cosmic
experience.
Joke.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm still a soul, even though I'm completely attached to everything in my life right now. Like, how is that possible? I thought it had to be one or the other. So anyway, to me, that's what I like to call, and what I've heard some of my teachers like Mirabai Starr, and I have a lot of other mentors that, we talk about this path of the feminine and this kind of shift in the dynamics of how we're experiencing being a soul and being a human and being a personality that's in service to the soul, as opposed to just eradicating the personality because it's in the way.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge and it's necessary. And as you would be well aware of, for so long as seekers, we've attempted to push away the melodrama and the story and the personality to transcend. But we've seen it doesn't work. It's completely dysfunctional, and it turns into a pathology of another kind. So really, we're really just getting the hang of this new potential of transcending, but also including, of waking up, but also growing up. And it really is a new territory for seekers. And Ken Wilber talks a lot about that as well. And a lot of the kind of leading teachers are talking about that new movement collectively of what we're being, I guess, invited to bring into our experience as seekers. We've done that other thing of just kind of transcending and going beyond the dualities of life, but to bring it back in to personality, back into relationship, back into it all, it's deep.
Yeah, it's a whole new burning ground for us. It's like, I guess that's, yeah. And I love that you said that aspect of growing up too. It's like both of those things. And I've been seeing and kind of leading a lot of my meditation practice and the meditation work I do with people, as that expansion is like even using our meditation time to actually like really open ourselves up to be able to hold all of that, because it's a lot, and that's why it hurts, and that's why like we cry ourselves asleep sometimes and we feel like we can't handle it, and it's a big deal, but we can handle it, especially if we have one another. And I think it is it's a whole new wave of spirituality that I think is really, it's really important. And like you said, it's like the whole, and it's very easy for me to see because I've also had experience of like having a teacher and like really giving my power over to the point where when that relationship ended, I felt like I had no Shakti. Like I actually, because I've always been very sensitive. I think if you're an addict or you have addictive tendencies in your psyche or whatever, and then you stop, you can become very sensitive. Like I can get high just like remembering when I used to take acid or like certain places I've been to in India, like in this moment, or think about Ram Dass, I could be like, ooh, you know, like I could totally go there just because whatever. And I've also trained myself to do that. But, you know, I like getting high. I always did. So it's like, that's not, you know, I could do that. But you know, there's something in that experience where like I was really dependent on a teacher and a community. And these were in the beginning stages of my sobriety, the first 5 years of my sobriety, and kind of rebuilt the family, you know, that I needed in that time. And when that kind of dissolved, you know, I was left feeling very, very disempowered and very like actually believing that I didn't have power. And that, you know, and the teacher at the time wasn't even, I mean, you know, there was a lot of things going on, so I'm not going to say, but it was also like them saying like, this isn't me, you're the one, like, I don't have, you know, them telling me and everyone like, well, I'm not the one, and you know, I'm not doing anything, like you're the one that has the power, like I'm just holding the, you know, so it's not like even everybody was like really conning me into anything, but it's a deep conditional thing for also, if you have any devotional nature, it's like you want someone to take your power. I do. I mean, you want like the right thing to take your power, but like you want that because you don't want to be like in charge of it all. You're aware that you're kind of screwed on your own in a certain way. And so you need a higher power, you know. So going through that really showed me like that it really like the pathology, like you said, of that whole system. Like I really saw that once I came out of that and healed from that, because I was like, well, that shit's just as fucked up as anything else. Like you know, no blame either, but like I was really feeling like I had no power because I wasn't tuned into these certain teachings and teachers and people. And you know, it was through that feeling of loss of power that I think I found a different flavor of power that feels more sustainable for me, because it's not really dependent on anything other than staying alive.
No, it's good. It's good. There's a lot of gems in it. Keep sharing. It's beautiful. But I think that's intensely relatable as well, that giving over of one's power, you know, even in intimate relationships, loving relationships. I mean, it's what typically women have done for so long. So even this new movement of the dynamics of being in a male-female Shakti Shiva relationship, whether it's same gender or different gender, like whatever, that dynamic of it's a new dynamic of both interplaying together, rather than the woman that for so long has given over the power. So I think also it's a huge adjustment for the male side of the relationship of like, holy shit, I want to be with this empowered, wise, switched on, Shakti-filled woman, but whew, she's not giving her power to me. You know, it can be shocking for the male side of it, the conditioned like nervous system and what's been the way for so long. So even
and what does it mean to be like, for you to feel taken care of then? Right. You know, I mean, it's a whole shift in like, if you're not my savior, you know, the majority of the time, whatever, we could play games. We could, you know, there's lots of role playing that could go on to satisfy, just for the record, to put that out there. You know, there's nothing wrong with any of that. Sure. You know, but like at our core, at our essence, you know, that's something that I'm curious about, you know, because it is a different thing, you know, and there is something inherent in the masculine in us that wants to be needed, that wants to, you know, that really like is in its power when it's needed in a certain way. And, you know, because I like to even look at these masculine and Shiva and Shaktis within myself, and then also how they obviously interplay in relationship. But it's interesting because it's like, yeah, I don't have any answers yet.
No, it's just interesting. It's new. It's a new domain. So we'll continue the conversation on that one.
Yeah, but I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it's like, it's not talked about a lot, or, you know, I have this whole idea that I want to do this skit where I just like do all the awful things that like happen, and we're like yelling and like looking at people's phones and like all the things that like happen. I feel like in people's relationships, I'm like, people are not posting about this on Instagram, especially relational stuff. And I understand, because I like posted like one thing about like a relational thing, and it was like, I just couldn't even handle it's just like, I don't even understand. It's just like, for me anyway, it's at a point where I'm like, I can't even let it be like out in the mix, you know, but I just have this whole fantasy that I just like create this really awful skit I will definitely need a trigger warning, but I'm like, you know, it's just so hard because I talk to so many people and we're just still in a lot of different dynamics and whatever. It's like, it's fine, you know, It's like we're human, and yeah, we're being asked to kind of operate where we're both in our power. And it's like, shit, you know, like we need two houses, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, Ram Dass always says like, keep the guru in the room. That's been a helpful teaching for me, you know? So it's like, here we are doing our thing, but then remembering the guru, remembering what's real. And that's a fucking deep practice, you know, that's the yoga of relationship, honoring like the relative nature of our separate relationship, yet, hey there, guru, thank you for reminding me. It's hard sometimes when you're triggered and fucking in that argument, in that trigger, really, when you're feeling slammed in that way. Fuck, it's hard to remember the guru.
Oh, totally. Because, and I think because we have an idea that it's like, I mean, for me, because I experienced this in my romantic relationship, but I have like, I mean, I'm really trying to like get rid of this story, but I have this thing with relationships and people, and, you know, people love it, they hate it, you know, we collaborate, it doesn't work out, it ends badly, you know, like all types of stuff happens, and it's so heartbreaking and it's so awful, especially when you're teaching about love. I mean, literally the last day of my last teacher training a couple weekends ago, I was in like the depths of like the deepest fucking relational BS, like capital B, capital S. And like, I had to show up and like, I was like setting up the room crying, being like, I can't believe, you know, and this was in that moment, me thinking that I was like even doing anything, which is a joke, but like, you know, I was stuck in it. And so I'm like, I can't believe I have to like hold this space all day and like talk about love. Like, I obviously know nothing. About love. What am I talking about? You know? And like, you know, the girls that I'm working with, they're like, okay, you know, like, it's fine. Like, everyone's going to share. It's going to be great. You know, and I'm like, and then I'm thinking like, I'm supposed to be like a mentor to them. And like, I'm like a master, you know, so many ideas, you know, and I just am like, you know what, like, whatever, you know, like this is what's happening. And then everyone shows up and it's like, I remember it's about the students, they share their offerings and it's so beautiful. We're all crying the whole time. Cause at the end of the Power of Love trainings, we like to have people do a 5-minute creative offering that like, maybe it's a meditation, maybe it's a song, but something that's, you know, related to the teachings, but also related to their own authentic expression. And the stuff that comes through is just so funny and beautiful. And it's so powerful. You know, they obviously teach a yoga class at the end as their final 2, but this is kind of like how I try to bridge that gap of like, well, where is your authentic creativity and how do we try to bring those together as a teacher? So anyway, I just remember that and I was like, oh man. And, you know, but we teach the things that, you know, our souls signed up for these curriculums. And, you know, it's like, I remember there's talking to this woman, Kim Kranz. She's an amazing artist, has that tarot deck, The Wild Unknown. I had her on my podcast once and we were talking about, she was like, yeah, naming something the wild unknown, like that's not like the best idea, you know, like what lessons do you think you're gonna have, you know? And I'm like, yeah, the power of love, like not really, you know, like it's definitely gonna make me really learn about it and really be true and really find what that means, which we can only find what that means through the dissolution of like what you were saying in those hard triggered moments of remembering like, okay, you know, like whatever I need to do right now to remember that guru is here, and that it is in my heart, and is in the room. You know what I mean? Even if it's like just you remembering it and the other person not, and you doing the mantra, I mean, I'm sure that happens to you and Joe, like you're like, one person's on, you're like, I'm just going to sit here and do the mantra and like really, it's like, and that's what I love about mantra too. I feel like it's always given me that thing to remember the guru and like to really bring that energy in. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if it's really helping, but I also feel like there's been so many times that the guru has shown up in moments that I really needed it, very obviously, that I can't totally deny the power of that and the mysterious power of those kind of miracles and how held we are in that grace, no matter what, no matter how bad we're screwing up or how good we're doing.
Yeah. It's so refreshing, Adriana, you just being honest with you freaking out as well on that last day and your humanness coming through. Because what's so common is, once again, a denying of a personality and that tendency to react and get freaked out. And often people have the perception that the teacher is the perfected one and there's no more of that left. So just to be honest with that and is very refreshing, because I think even that is new in the conversation. That kind of quest for perfectionism and just that squeaky clean, almost stone-like Buddha that one is trying to create. It's the more people that are honest with that, the human drama, but also the remembering of what's real, that feels very refreshing and very helpful. Again, especially for the younger teachers out there, that's a thick trap, that thick trap of trying to be the perfect one. And it's just not sustainable.
No, and it's in the same energy of all that
Yeah.
self-harm that we're trying to get out of. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I mean,
Mhm.
we might experience it in moments and hopefully like learn what to do with it. But exactly what you're saying. It's like we want to try to really help each other out of those places of perfectionism and
Mhm.
also remembering the truth, because like also for me, if I just let myself fully go in that direction, I mean, I can't, it wouldn't be, it would not be good. There would not be too many people probably hanging around me for too long. So, like my practice is very important. And, like I think it's like you said, I'm really glad you brought that up. It is this dance of both. And not just that, people probably would still want to come around, but I would be exhausted, really, is what would happen. Because even just being super authentic and intimate is on some level really exhausting. Like there's a reason why we also kind of button our shirts and like,
Mm.
show up and like really hold space for others and like, because there's like a giving that happens that is only kind of coming from the personality that then is exhausting. And so it is like the way that we take care of ourselves is to, stay plugged into that space of,
Mm.
however it is that you connect to grace, and why our own personal practices, I think, as we evolve and grow as teachers is also important for sure.
Yeah.
And a little bit of professionalism. I mean, I'm definitely learning a lot about that. It does actually help me a lot to not be so exhausted after I do things. Because to be so in the mode of like the feminine and feeling and like, the masculine, it's like I need to like, hold it up and hold it together. And,
Mm.
that really helps a lot too.
Yeah,
So
good
all of us
point.
are finding those balances. But I do also feel like so many of us and so much of the yoga world, needs a little bit of, messy hair. And, sometimes I'll start like that, like mess your hair, like right in the beginning. It's like,
Yeah.
close your eyes, like relax your body, like, relax your belly, feel your eyes behind your eyelids and like really come into that space, and then like place your hands on your head and just like start moving your hair around. Just like get people like right away, just like mess your hair up a little
I
bit. You
like
can stay
that.
relaxed, but
That's a good little guided meditation, I think, huh? Just like a 2-minute glimpse of like the quietness, the softness, then just fucking mess it all up. Life's messy, you know?
yeah, totally, totally. And it's like you said, it's like it's not like that's better. It's just like what do we need? Like what permission do we need? And what does that look like? And each of us has our own way. Some of us, some of my best friends, like, they're so like the opposite of that, and they come to my house and they wind up getting like honey in their hair within 3 minutes. They're like, what's going on? And they're like serving tea and, and I love that. I love being in that energy of people that have that. It's just different, and we're all so different. And so I think it's when we can learn to appreciate those differences too, and not feel like we're less than because we're different than other people. That to me is like what loving everyone is about. And yeah, it's not easy. I'm not saying I do it well or even all the time at all. But yeah, that feeling of being like, oh, I'm like this and you're like that. And like, how could you get a little messy and me kind of like sit down and be quiet while you like serve this beautiful tea. And I just watch in awe because I could never do that without making a huge mess.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's such a powerful antidote for that very, very common pattern to see something we love and to either hate on it, which is just bizarre, but it's so fucking common. Hate on it, compare, and then trying to be that, but in a way that's not inspiring. It's from fear once again. Super, super common, huh? So to appreciate, to be in awe, to love, the art of loving.
Yeah. And honestly, it's like, I don't know, I have a couple different lineages but Baba Ramdas and Neem Karoli Baba and that whole introduction to, Bhakti Yoga in that way, there's a lot of like actual love that's transmitted that is spiritual love, and like the things we're talking about of like, learning how to do this in relationships. And, and of course it's so challenging and it just hasn't been done a lot. So a lot of us I'm like constantly like, I just like take breaks because I'm like, I can only like, I don't even know, like, because I'm super interested in how to do it because I always want to know how to do the next thing that I can't do for some reason. I'm like, I had to be like, okay, just like, it's let it go. But, there's something to that spiritual love too, that I think is so important, that is available, whether we're in a relationship or not, or we're alone or we're together, or, and that I'm so grateful to that lineage for really, or that, it's not really, I don't know, like I've heard it called a non-linear lineage because it doesn't have like, there's not, hierarchies really or anything like that, although it gets created in the community anyway. But just those teachings and those teachers and the energy of it, it's like, it's such an energetic thing, and that's why it's sometimes hard to talk about, but it's a real thing. Love is so real, as we know, when we fall in love or when we have our hearts broken, but that same energy is available through, our practice and through connecting to spirit with that intention. So I'm so grateful for that because there's been many times in my life where I felt very unloved and very alone, and still do in some moments. And it's kind of my go-to affliction, or, it's just feeling alone and unloved and unworthy of love, and for me, it's like the idea of like, you're worthy, obviously we all want to tell each other we're worthy of love because it's true, on some level. And I also just really like to be like, maybe I'm not, like maybe you're not, maybe a part of me is actually like, maybe that's really true for a part of me. It's just not worthy. It doesn't mean it's not going to be, but it's like, there is parts that like really, they don't understand what it means to be loved. And that's okay, because they're going to be fucking loved anyway. Like God doesn't get especially in this, in this world and with these teachings and the energy, it goes to the places in us that don't feel loved and that don't know how to be loved. And, sometimes I think the ideas of certain teachings get confusing, because you're like, well, this part doesn't feel worthy of love, so I have to get it to feel worthy of love. And that's just not my experience. It's more like, let's just pour a bunch of love on that part of you that I'm not sure it's ever going to figure out how to be open to love. It might, but also maybe we're just going to love it just how it is. And like, maybe that's the best that we can do. And maybe that's enough too.
I think it is. I think that attempt to try to get that thing to be worthy of love, like the place we do that from is a place that just can't can't transform it, can't fix it, can't heal it. And that Alan Watts talks about trying to do that is like trying to lift ourselves up by pulling at our bootstraps. It's like this, like pushing against a force like gravity. It's like it just can't be done from that vantage point. It seems it might create a temporary feeling of like, yeah, I did something, but pretty much always that's just a kind of positive, very superficial facade, a temporary feeling of feel good. But I mean, that deep love that Maharaji is renowned for, I mean, disciple after disciple, they just reflect on their stories of Maharaji knowing everything about them, all of their shit, all of their lies, all of their beauty, everything, and still unconditionally loving. So it's not like he was like, I'll love you when you fix that thing that's not worthy of love. He just loved. So you're right on. It's that love, that power of love. It doesn't need that thing that doesn't feel worthy to think that it's then worthy. I mean,
yeah. But I think the tricky part is that we have to let it be in the room at some point, and that's the painful part. And that's where I have a lot of compassion for all of us that are doing the work, because
it takes such compassion.
Really yeah, it can really hurt to be like, all right, like I am completely ashamed of you and like hate you, maybe even, like parts of us that have like ruined certain relations, like all types of stuff that we go through. And it's like to allow those, motherfuckers in the room is like, ooh, like that's some deep self-love, and that's like, that's where I feel a lot of compassion for us and for the ways that we avoid doing that sometimes. I'm like, well, we get mad at each other for all the things we're avoiding, but like, it's hard. It hurts. I mean, it doesn't hurt for too long, but it hurts, it's a real thing. It hurts, reintegrating and all these parts of us that, are just, they have shadow, it's like we all have shadows. We all have, or even our everything within us has this one side that's just so luminous and bright and so fucking helpful and like uplifting. And we're like, yeah, I love this. And then that same part will have another side that's like the opposite, that's afraid, that's damaging, that's, all types of stuff that like we don't want to admit because it's hard. And I think that that's the part that a lot of us, even in the yoga practice and in the yoga world, could really utilize an acknowledgement of, not like, because it's all going to come out on some level anyway. So I really feel like if we really are trying to have the experience of connectedness and this feminine path of like, we are really all related and connected, just like, the roots of trees under the earth. And, if we really want to take that on, then I have to assume that you're going to feel those things from me. And so it's up to me to like work on myself and that's why I keep doing the work on myself, so I can be available to others. And it's not like I'm selfish too sometimes, of course, but it's not a selfish thing. It's like this is how I've learned how to even be available at all to anyone else. Because when I first started, I didn't even know anyone else existed, to be totally honest. I was so lost. And so I really feel that, and I'm very grateful for you and for so many people out there that are holding space for that and that are also doing that in your own ways. I think it's a really courageous thing to take on, to be an aspiring yogi and to step on to a path of sincerity and truth. It's going to burn. So there's a lot of gentleness and a lot of love that's required, and good friends.
That's a beautiful place to wrap this up, Adriana. Is there anything else you want to share with the listeners or the viewers?
Well, one of the things I always love to say is that you're enough and that you're never too much. Because it's usually the too muchness that kind of gets us. So I always love to share that with people that I work with. And just, I always have lots of amazing things coming up. One thing, is it okay if I share one thing that's coming up? That
share as many as you want. Share as many as you want.
We're, my partner David and I are leading a energy healing retreat and training, which we're really excited about because we both do energy healing that comes from these traditions, you know, and it's kind of like not really talked about or something, you know what I mean? Then you like go see Ram Dass, you get like blasted with all this energy and you're like, what's going on? You're like in love, and then you're in grief, and then you're in joy, and then you're in sorrow, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So, you know, we both, you know, carry our own, you know, some of that, and do a lot of that kind of work with people and help them connect into that inner energy through meditation, but just also through movement and lots of things. So we're excited to kind of help facilitate a training where people can kind of learn how to work with their own creative and sexual energy and devotional energy and that spiritual love energy. So we have that happening here in Ojai in November, and then we're going to do an India pilgrimage to some of the places that I was talking about earlier in the show, and then a teacher training there as well. So I'm really excited to bring some friends there and just offer these really deep and authentic teachings that are so based in love and really true healing, you know, that I feel the world really needs us to keep opening ourselves to, and just to keep going. And anyone that feels like, you know, they really need some good support, you know, just to tap into the part of you that really is willing to route for it. You know, I think that when we're in really, really hard moments, it's so easy to feel like we're alone. And so I just want to also share that if anybody's listening and feels like really low and is in a super hard moment, that it always helps to reach out to someone who can just, you know, hold you through it. And that I love you. That's
so
it.
beautiful, Adriana. And I'm so happy that you and Harshit are together and offering these beautiful trainings and experiences for people. It's really powerful work you're both doing. So yeah, I bow to you. I love you, and really great to connect.
Yes.
Let's
so
do it
good.
again.
So
I could listen to you talk for hours. I love the wisdom that comes through, and the honesty, and just all of it. It's really beautiful. So
yes, thank you. And yeah, we'll have to do it again. I took a little break from my podcast because it's a lot of work. So good job for putting this out there, because I love listening to them, and I received that, you know, and at some point I was like, I need a break. It's a lot. So I applaud you, and I'm very grateful just for the effort and the energy you're putting into this as well. But
yeah, likewise. I love your podcast. I'll leave a link to that as well. Go on and have a listen.
There was some good insight.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Sure, so.
All right. Until next time, Ram Ram.
Ram Ram, sending you love.
Yeah, you too.